Overflow occurs when content is larger than the defined size of its container, causing it to go outside the bounds. So the overflow property helps to manage how content should behave in such cases. Understanding the overflow property. The overflow property controls how content is displayed when it exceeds the container's width or height. And this happens especially when you set a fixed width on an element or a fixed height on an element. So if you set a fixed width or height on an element and then the content is actually or the content exceeds the size of that element, then definitely overflow will occur in such design. So it affects block level elements like divs and can be applied to either the entire element or specific axis. So common overflow property values, we have the visible, which is the default. Content will not be clipped and will overflow outside the container. So it is the default behavior of elements if no overflow is specified. We have hidden, we have scroll, we have auto. So hidden, content that exceeds the container will be clipped, that is cut off and not visible. So useful for creating cropped areas and controlling the visual area of an element. Scroll. So this scroll actually adds scroll bars, both horizontal and vertical, to the container, allowing users to scroll to see the overflow content. So scroll bars will always be present, even if the content fits within the container. So whenever you put this scroll, okay, if you set the value of the overflow property to scroll, so there's going to be a scroll bar right on that element. And then we have auto. So auto adds scroll bar only if the content exceed the container size. So if the content fits, no scroll bars appear. So this is actually determined based on the overflowing content. So commonly used for responsive designs to avoid unnecessary scroll bars. So the difference between this scroll and auto is that if you set the value of overflow to scroll, whether the content fits or not, the scroll bar will appear. But for auto, scroll bar appears only if the content exceeds the container size. So quickly, let's see that as we close for today. Overflow. Okay, I haven't set that up. CSS Overflow. Right, so quickly, I'm going to load this up. Overflow. Great. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div with an ID of, let's say, box 1. And then I will give this lorem 80 as a lot of content there anyways. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. Okay, great. Now what I'm going to do is my internal CSS, I will select that div with an ID of box 1. So box 1, right? Box 1, we're going to have okay, border first. Let's see what's going on. Border 1 pixel solid black. Okay, 1 pixel solid black. Refresh. So we have this. Now, if I resize it by raising the width to maybe 450 pixels, width 450 pixels. So see what just happened now. So I've been able to shrink the element to this size, this fixed width. Now, if I add more content, to this element, right, or to this box, so the height will keep on stretching responsively. It's not going to overflow. It's not going to go out of this border. So let's try it. I'm going to add more content. Say for instance, if I copy these few lines, copy, and then dump it right here. Great. So I've increased the content, and then back to the browser and refresh. So you see, overflow has not occurred at this point, and that's because we have not set a fixed height. So the box, or yeah, this box right now is still responsive, but the moment I set a fixed width, height, a fixed height that is not as tall as the height of the content. Now let's check. Let's figure out the height of this content right now. Inspect. Inspect. Okay, let's check out the height. Okay, so the height right now is 270. 270. So let's see what's going to happen if I set the height to maybe 200. Look at it. If I set the height to 200 or maybe 180, in short, anything less than 270. So height 180 pixels. Look at what's going to happen now. Refresh. What do we have? We have what? Overflowing content. So this content right now could not fit in the box. All right, the height of the box, and that's because of the fixed height that we set on that element. So overflow has occurred right now. Now, one thing we can do is to hide this overflowing content, because the default value of overflow is visible, and that is why we can see the overflowing content actually. So right now we go to the browser and say, okay, on this element overflow, if I say visible, which is the default, it's not going to change anything because that is the default value and we can see the overflowing content at this point. Good. But if you don't want to see it, or if you don't want your user to see any overflowing content, that means you have to change the value of overflow property to hidden. Save. If I refresh now, then it will hide the overflowing content. So now I can't see the overflowing content basically. All right. And then another thing is, if you actually want the overflowing content to be there, right? But then you want the user to be able to scroll, right? That means you have to set the value to scroll. So I'm going to first comment this, ensure that you can see the overflowing content. Now let's introduce the scroll bar. So that way you see overflow, scroll, save to the browser, refresh. So good. So you see, we now have this scroll bar. We can now scroll to see the overflowing content. So we can't scroll horizontally, and that's because there is no any overflowing content along the horizontal axis. So the overflowing content is only along the vertical axis, and that is why we can only scroll vertically. And then finally, we have the auto. So first, I'm going to comment this out, ensure that it's back to visible, so we can see the overflowing content. Now, auto means that if the content exceeds the height of the element, right, of the entire box, then the browser will introduce a scroll bar. So overflow, auto, save, and then refresh. Great. So we still have our scroll bar, and that's because we have what? Overflowing content.